Hello, everybody. Welcome to Points on the Board. I am William Del Pilar, a former NFL analyst and fantasy sports pioneer who helped commercialize the industry. Well, tonight, we'll be pulling back the curtain on the NBA's wildest, most explosive scandal yet, the NBA gambling scandal, where locker room secrets, mafia poker games, and million-dollar prop bets collide. How deep does it go? And could your favorite superstar be caught in the crossfire? Before we begin, before I break it down, before I bring you some personal stories, do not forget to click the thumbs up and like. And yes, and like while you listen. Make sure you bookmark grumblingsmedia.com. Then follow us on your favorite platform like YouTube, Rumble, Apple, Spotify, y Pandora under the handle Grumblings Media. And with that out of the way, let's get to it. We have a full court press, the NBA's betting scandal, and the anatomy of corruption. That is tonight's topic. The 2025 NBA betting scandal is an unprecedented convergence of organized crime, tech-enabled cheating, and insider manipulation. Now, this spans not only from the locker rooms and betting apps, it goes all the way to the halls of Congress now because they're looking and asking questions. So what began as odd betting patterns became a sprawling FBI case implicating coaches, player circles, and mafia operations. It's shaking up the league, there's no doubt. It's exposing the vulnerabilities I talked about 30 years ago when the fantasy sports industry, when we got a carve out that allowed our industry to exist. We saw this coming. And now they're talking about sweeping reforms that likely will not be enough. So later in the show, I'm going to reveal how tech right out of a spy movie turned NBA games and poker nights into a gold mine for the mob. Really, it's just like it's right out of the movies. But right now, let's talk about the NBA's gambling gold rush and its dangers. Now, for those of you who may not realize this, the NBA aggressively embraced prop bets and fantasy gaming to boost popularity and revenue, building close ties with DraftKings, FanDuel, and Sportsbook. If I remember correctly, I was at the seminar when it was either FanDuel or DraftKings made the big announcement they were partnering with the NBA. As I alluded to earlier in the show, I was a fantasy sports pioneer. I helped commercialize the industry. I'm a traditional player. I had the big ego. They really knock just when Ryan Clark made his bigoted comments towards the NFL Network hire. And the guy said, look, I'm not some fantasy analyst. Look, I will put my money on a fantasy analyst before I put it on Stephen A. Smith, Ryan Clark, anybody. Our industry brought analytics into the game. They were always there, but beat reporters never talked about it from that perspective. So yes, we do know more than the average Joe Blow. I was seen as an insider in my heyday. I was building a company. I did not want to go the path of Jay Glazer or Adam Kaplan, two insiders that I grew up with in the industry, and I was just as good as they were. But that wasn't my shtick. But I had all this information and I combined it with data. And I was a force to be reckoned with. I was seen as one of the premier fantasy sports players in the country at the time. And I saw this coming. I go, our carve out, I'm going to talk about that here in a few moments, but our carve out's going to open this door. And sure enough, that door was open, I don't know what, 15 years ago, about 15 years ago, maybe. Now, league policies in the NBA made individual player stats, injury mysteries central to the fan experience and gambling, or rather in every industry, in every professional. The big secret is that the reason they had the injury report was because of Vegas. And the NFL was always, we're not for gambling. No, we're not for gambling. But they understood gamblers wanted the information, so they provided it. Why? It made the sport more popular. Basketball's no different. Hockey's no different. NASCAR, even NASCAR, and obviously the NBA. So all of that became central to the fan experience and gambling, and by extension, fantasy sports. All that did was set this all up to where we are at today. It primed the system for abuse. Team staff, coaches, and player circles became guardians of high-stakes market-moving secrets. So what do I mean? In other words, they had valuable insider information like injuries or lineup changes, and that could influence betting odds. And they were sought out by gamblers looking for an edge. I had this free product, and I thought it was going to be a big hit. And it was middling. I was like, man, look at all this work. And one of my guys said, well, why don't we put it in our Sunday package? It became our most popular item in our Sunday package that people pay for. And why? Because every gambler wanted it. We had the latest injuries, what we were hearing, what our scouts, not our scouts on the teams, but the beat reporters covering the team, what they were hearing. It was the latest. We had it in there. And people would tell us, yeah, I get your most expensive option because it has that in there. And all that was an accumulation of the week's data of injuries, analyzing them, breaking them down with the latest updates on them. Friday and Saturdays, we would be calling the beat reporters to get the latest information. And they were talking to the agents, they were talking to the players, they were talking to the coaches. So now you're removing us, the reporters and all that. You're going straight to these coaches, to these players, but they're doing it in an illegal fashion. So what if the fastest way to millions in the NBA isn't making the playoffs for the players, but texting your buddy an injury scoop? For us, that made us a lot of money, and we worked hard to grab that information. It was all legal, but this is illegal. If you think players and staff were the only ones cashing in, though, wait until you hear how the Mafia made it their game. So how did this all start? Let's get a little bit of a timeline here first. How it all fell apart. In early 2023-24, AI-powered sports books, they noticed sudden sharp surges in prop bets based on insider information. The algorithms picked up a boop, boop, boop. Of course, I'm doing it very simple. I don't know how algorithms are all grinding away, but just think of that nice and calm, regular boop. And that's when somebody goes, whoa, what's that? Woo! So Terry Rozier texted a friend about a fake injury. Terry Rozier is a current NBA guard for the Miami Heat, or was, and he was formerly with the Celtics and Charlotte Hornets, nicknamed Scary Terry. He was a clutch playoff performer, and he's been implicated in all this. Then Damon Jones relays Lakers and LeBron-related injury information as well. Now, Damon Jones is a former NBA player and coach, and he played as a guard with the Cavaliers. He was known for being a three-point shooter. And he also coached in the NBA. See how that works? And then you have Chauncey Billups, who was recruited as a mafioso face card for poker grifts. Now, this is where it gets interesting because Chauncey Billups is a former NBA All-Star point guard, led the Pistons to an NBA championship in 2004, Finals MVP, and he's currently the head coach of the Portland Trailblazers, nicknamed Mr. Big Shot for his clutch performances. He's also a Hall of Fame inductee, 2024. So Billups is a big name within basketball. Nobody knows him outside of basketball, but he's a big name within basketball. So Rozier will tell associates he'd fake an injury as a player now, letting them place winning bets on his underperformance. Somebody would sit there and say, just to put in layman terms, okay, Billups going to score 50 points. So if he goes over it, if he doesn't, you win this much. If he goes over it, you win this much, based off your predictions. Well, if you knew he wasn't going to perform, you can make a killing. Now, Damon Jones shared inside info about LeBron's injury before it was public, enabling lucrative bets against the Lakers. Now, Billups, he was invited to Mafia poker games as a celebrity. He was a celebrity draw. And that it was games that were rigged, but he would legitimize them, the high-stakes gambling. So what I'm trying to say is, we'll be there. Yeah, we got Chauncey Billups. Oh, man, really? NBA All-Star? So that legitimized the game. Well, these are got to be straight up. And we're not talking cheap putt. We're talking about $100,000 hands here. So in February 9th of 2023, who shared privileged injury news about LeBron James to the mafioso-connected bettors. Massive wagers hit books before public announcements showing the lethal combination of the proximity and the tech. As soon as they find out, boom, you're not going to a bookie, you're going to an app now, legally. Now, in March of 2023 through 2025, so for a couple of years, Rozier sits a game for pain, and Mafia poker nights featuring Billups and Jones are all happy. Now you have tech-enhanced cheating tools at the mafioso games, the poker games, x-ray tables, shuffler machines, covert glasses. The mobsters were earning millions upon millions upon millions. The house never loses, I guess. Now, in October 3rd of 2025, they announced 34 indictments, Jones, Billups, Rozier, and Mafia figures. Sportsbook suspended lines. The NBA launches a fleet of internal members, warning the whole league. You better clean that house up, man. Don't let them know. Now, I have no doubt in my mind the NBA probably knew what was happening here in some form or fashion. I'm speculating here, but a lot of times people know what's happening within their store, their office, etc., and they look the other way. Bro's cheating on his wife. Well, that's their business. I'm looking the other way. Bro's heading home early every Friday. I'm looking the other way. Bro's just expense that. I said, I'm going to look the other way. I know in my heart he knew about this. And that, all those internal memos, to me, was a heads up. It was a heads up. We don't know what else they got. You better make sure your house is clean. If it's happening, you better tell those guys to be on the down. So let's discover how the entourage access to NBA superstars can turn the smallest secret into the biggest scandal. And if you're wondering just how close the stars got to the scheme, well, let's talk about let's reveal the power of inner circles. So how did the scheme spread? Intermediaries, technology, and the Mafia's playbook. That's how. Prosecutors revealed that Robert L. Stroud, he's a shadowy fixer who would actively recruit NBA insiders for the mob. He would use personal relationships as on-ramps into the league's secrets, meaning he knew somebody, he would use them to find things out. He's what you call a criminal intermediary. Nobody high up, but somebody connected. Again, from Louisville, known for leveraging his NBA connections to bring insiders like Jones and Billups into Mafia betting and poker schemes. Now, the Mafia families we're talking about here are the Genovese, the Gambino, and the Lucchese. These are well-established dynasties when it comes to the mob. I forgot the Bonanno. 4 Mafia families. So these families engineered both the betting fraud and the high stakes. They rigged poker games. They used technology straight out of Hollywood heist movies. Again, X-ray and marked cards, wireless transmitters. Again, the shuffling machines and military-style signal relays. This is a serious operation. So you have poker face card celebrities were Billup and Jones, and they drew in wealthy prey, and they were systematically fleeced. And there were digital trails. They used burner phones. They had encrypted chats enabled. And all of this, no matter how careful they were, eventually exposed them. You're always going to have a digital trail. Burner phones can eventually be tracked down if you're lucky enough where you can grab one. Encrypted chats, as we saw, a signal can be broken. So what if the guy you're taking selfies with was actually lining up the score for the mob? Hey, Chauncey, come here, take a picture. I said, man, they wiped me out that night, Chauncey. I don't know if I can play again. Sure, you can. I'm heading there tonight. So what's the surprising link between NBA celebrity friendships and multi-million-dollar scams? And then what about proximity being a risk? Wait till we unpack LeBron's locker room. The king, long live the king. The king is dead. Long live the king. So don't say, long live the king, then that king dies, long live the new king. Where's LeBron? He's on towards the end of his run here. And if he's implicated in any of this, and he's already implicated by just knowing certain people, but that doesn't mean he's guilty. But they're going to be digging into that. So first, let's talk about the proximity and superstar connections and why inner circles matter. Jones' deep connection to LeBron James as a friend, as a coach, as a trusted insider. That offered Jones the ability to have privileged access to his health and status information. And this shows how even the richest and most powerful athletes are only as secure as their circle's discretion. Didn't matter how careful King James was, he was only as careful as Damon Jones would be. Now, Maverick Carter, LeBron's manager, separately admitted to placing past illegal NBA bets. That's why I'm saying some of these people knew. They should look the other way. Again, Maverick Carter, LeBron's manager, separately admitted to placing past illegal NBA bets. Obviously, this highlights the risk of managers and agents going rogue, regardless of the star's awareness. Now, the DOJ and NBA quietly continue the forensics to determine if any other player threes or high-value stars are compromised by their own entourages. Now, that's what they're saying. They may be looking at the player threes or the other high-value stars themselves. Now, player three is a term used in indictments and media to refer anonymously to a high-profile NBA athlete in this case, who may have been affected by the leaks, but whose identity hasn't been publicly revealed or confirmed. Now, they're saying they're still investigating, which may be true, but they probably already know who some of these, and people are, and they're sweating bullets. But regardless, what this does is signals potential new stars under investigation. So could the most important player in an NBA scandal be the guy who hands out towels in the locker room? And what about planned injuries and locker room leaks? How it changed fantasy sports and real life fortune. This scheme reached every corner of the league. Even your fantasy lineup wasn't safe, people. That's something I know about. Not the gambling side, but how important it is to know who's hurt, who's not. That's why I dominated. I had all this information. I had contacts. It's kind of funny now that I'm conservative. I can't get anybody to return my call now that I've come out. God, that burns me up. So now, Rozier coordinated fake injuries again and tipped off friends to prop bet opportunity. This is the fantasy side of it. So a prop bet is a wager, well, not fantasy, but just it started in fantasy and then it expanded to betting. Who's going to go first? And the reason I say that is we've been doing prop bets in fantasy since since fantasy went commercial. And you really couldn't do that with just regular bets. It's something that came on later. But anyway, a prop bet is a wager on a specific event or statistic in a game. It's like betting on how many points a player scores or if they will leave early with an injury, not just who wins or loses. And you can do these bets while the game's being played. Now, Jones's insider knowledge relayed in real time, obviously that influenced the league and fantasy markets. So an example, Jones texts a contact that LeBron James won't play that night before it's public. So the contact places bets and adjusts fantasy lineups, gaining a big advantage over others. Now, say fantasy lineups not because of DraftKings and FanDuel, where those are money. You see, it's gambling when you have to put money down to play. In true fantasy, you don't do that. But in daily fantasy, you do. Thus, it's gambling. So we can call it fantasy, and I'm calling it fantasy because that's how it's viewed technically, but it's gambling. Now, Billups, his celebrity cachet, it brought big money poker fish to the table, only for the high-tech cheating tools to guarantee their losses. And so what happened was you had financial transfers, encrypted messages, witness testimony. All of this is what the prosecutor now has, or he secured that before he went out and arrested these people. So, but what about the technologies that turn humans into the smallest pieces in this multi-million-dollar puzzle? As the money poured in, the integrity poured out. Why? Because money corrupts. Now, fantasy sports was in many ways part of the front line here with the prop bets. So what about the injury reporting and betting market vulnerabilities? There's new scrutiny that's falling on soft tissues and pain injuries. Sports books are struggling to independently verify this legitimacy, meaning, yeah, his ankle's not really long-term, but he's going to sit out a game or two. We're talking basketball here. Now, sports books need to know all this to put the over and under, things of that nature, and they're struggling to verify legitimacy. And what this does is opens gaps for manipulation. So, for example, a player reports back pain, my back, and sits out unexpectedly. Sports books can't tell if it's real or fake for betting advantage. Well, is he really experiencing that back pain? So that's what I mean by there's new scrutiny on soft tissues and pain injury, And we all saw this coming. I predicted this, and I was in the minority. Why? Because the fantasy industry wanted the money that these sports books would bring. The fantasy industry is made up of small, mid, and large players, a handful of large corporate players, a handful of mid-sized companies that were successful, could actually hire people, make a profit. That's where my company fell in. Then you have the everyday Joe, who's just doing it out of passion, love, barely breaking even, losing money, but he doesn't care because he's doing it's not really a business. You have millions of those types who are trying to make it a business. But now sports books suspend and scrutinize some of these prop bets at the first sign when they see something they deem fishy. First sign of suspicious action, step, change, and real-time oversight. In fancy words, we see something, we're going to stop it. So breaks. Hey, why is that guy dropping $100,000? Joe Schmuckatelli isn't going to finish the game. He just threw up 20 points. He's looking good. Bam! He's holding the back. Say what? So I knew a runner for a very wealthy gambler, professional gambler, Bill Walters. He had runners. Now, his runners would make large bets. And the reason he did this, because they wouldn't allow him to make bets in a lot of casinos because he could move the line. He had access to good info. He would win a lot. So he utilized what is called runners. Somebody carrying a 30,000 or 50,000 in their bag and they go make a bet. And that would move the line. Sportsbooks don't like that. A sportsbook, what they'll do is they'll quickly change the odds or betting limits to protect themselves from this type of info, inside info, or a big liability. Oh, something's up. Something's happening here. And if we're not on top of it and we lose out, we're going to be paying out more than we're taking in. The house never loses, and they'll do everything to keep from losing. But now, sports books now watch for and they suspend markets when any surge of big bets appears just before the news breaks. They'll put a freeze. Something's up here because it signals possible insider action. Whoa, we're seeing 800,000 bets being changed because of this player or this prediction or who's going to score the TD here or if he's going to finish the game. Lock it down, meaning stop accepting any more bets on this. It's usually a sudden surge of a bunch of bets through sports betting apps. So on a side note here real quick, what I was trying to think of, it's going to be the death knell of all these sports books, all FanDuel and DraftKings is Polymarket. Polymarket, it's the most talked about prediction machine because it mixes crypto, crowdsourced forecasting, and gambling. And it lets anyone bet on virtually anything. And now it's getting big time investors and league partnerships. So here's what it does. It has a 90% accuracy rate because of several key factors. I had to dig up my notes on this. Crowd wisdom, thousands of users with diverse backgrounds, they bet real money. And it's based on their own knowledge, their own research, and their own inside info. So this aggregation, it tends to cancel out the individual biases and reflects the latest data. Then there's the financial incentives. Users are motivated to be accurate because their own money is on the line. For politics, you don't have a poster, you don't have a pundit. People who are saying this, they're putting their own money on the line. And how are they saying it? By where they're putting their money. And Frank Luntz says, yeah, Trump's going to lose by 20. And then he goes to Poly Market and bets 100 G's on Trump winning. That's what I mean. It's its own truth teller. Then there's a real-time adjustments. Unlike stats or poll forecasts, Poly Market prices change instantly as new information emerges. Big news, breaking events. Then there's the liquidity and volume. The more people bet, especially experts and smart money, the sharper and more reliable the market becomes. Elections, sports, or big headlines. Those are what are called high liquidity markets, and they're consistently outperforming other prediction methods. So you have somebody using Polymart, they could be making bets on FanDuel as well. Polymarket's eventually going to destroy these type of sport books. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but it's going to be much harder for them to make the easy money with Polymarket. So Polymarket is accurate because it combines crowdsourced intelligence, real-time information, and strong financial incentives for participants to be right. It's not just opinionated with blockchain, and it has blockchain transparency. Now, and what makes this important is the fantasy football expert, the handicapper expert, they're going to be using Polymarket themselves. But how can you sell something or data when it's happening there in real time and anybody else can jump on it? Anyway, there's my digression. But regardless, sports books right now watch for and suspend markets when any surge of big bets appear. Again, just before news breaks. Again, it's a sudden surge of a lot of bets going to the app. And it's often smaller amounts, but in large volume. And that can tip off suspicious insider activity, just like the single high roller's big bet of Bill Walters once did. So there's various ways cheating that's not cheating with what Bill Walters was doing. They just didn't like the fact how good he was at winning. What we're referring to here is insider information they shouldn't have. And maybe Bill Walters had that. I don't know. But regardless, media and players are voicing concern. What about legitimate injuries suddenly caught in the new web of suspicion? He really does screw up his ankle. You're faking it, bro. You're faking it. Players with real injuries now face media speculation and public doubt, like Rozier being doubted for his ankle pain after his scandal. So how have fantasy players, sports bettors, and innocent stars gotten pulled under by what's pretty much a riptide of suspicion? Fantasy sports have gone from innocent fun to an insider edge. So with the rise of daily fantasy and player-specific props, insider leagues can swing entire contests and millions of dollars in winnings or losses. But it's just fantasy. Daily fantasy is gambling. The moment you have to put money to play, it's gambling on everything. So in a traditional league that lasts a full season, it's $100. There's 10 of us, so you're going to win $1,000. There's no bet for this game, that player, yada, yada, yada. You're putting it in the pot, and the best GM will win. The money's not that important, and it's trivial. It's who's the smartest general manager. That's the core difference. With daily fantasy, you have to bet. And it's prop bets. They've tried, and there are some leagues set up systems where every week you can pick your own starting lineup from all the players, So there's that, but still gambling. It's a short-term bet. Your skill set is not there as it would be for a full season. So how did this all come about? Well, it all started with two things. We had the UIGEA, and that is Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act. It was a fantasy sports carve-out, which allowed us to have, because they wanted to deem what we did as gambling. And what we were doing at the time with a season-long game was not gambling. So this legal exemption, it allowed fantasy sports to operate as games of skill rather than illegal gambling. So that got the ball rolling. Then the 2018 Supreme Court decision, Murphy versus the NCAA, allowed states like New Jersey to legalize sports betting. Gambling was here to stay. Now, platform monitoring in fantasy data and daily fantasy, they're the ones who started the flag suspicious betting activity. But they didn't always prevent losses before red flags were cleared, meaning they were catching this after the fact. Now, betting platforms and daily fantasy sites, they monitor it, as I said, for unusual activity. Again, too many entries or bets on a player who's expected to underperform because of a leak. So, he's not going to get his points. Why? Just found out. He's got an injury. Now, this wasn't done by the news or proper coach or team announcement. Somebody from within that locker room spilled up. It's no different than what Congress does. Congress gets a lot of information because of the legalities of how certain corporations have to run their deals. So Congress hears all of this first because of regulations, and they go work the stock market. That's how Nancy Pelosi became worth 130 million. Same concept here. So the entourage, somebody in the player's entourage or their manager leaks the information out, and even innocent stars get involved. Why? Yeah, Dave, I can't go tonight. And there's part of LeBron's entourage here, for example. Man, I just heard Luka's not going to be playing this game. Boom, runs the make the bet, runs the let his people know. So that will swing both gambling and fantasy outcomes, even when the stars have no idea their info has been leaked. So fantasy contest results, just like betting, can be affected by insider information spreading behind the scenes. That's what they paid me for. I had all these contacts, my company did, and we were the best at it. I did multiple shows a week, got calls. I had to turn down radio shows. I was burning both ends of the candle, trying to run a business and do that. I should have chosen one in hindsight. Regardless, what if your fantasy season was influenced by a secret text between superstars and you had no idea? Think about that. But reform is on the way, and it's coming with serious consequences. Now, the NBA and Congress have responded. There are memos, policy, and politics that people are now discovering that this has been going on for a while. Multiple league-wide memos were warning teams. Bet reforms are going to happen. There's now going to be an AI-powered integrity monitoring, and they're going to try to educate on gambling risks and making all this mandatory. So what those rules on prop bets are, don't know yet. But teams will be forced to use AI to help detect suspicious gambling activity, and players and staff will be forced to receive required training. And the injury access, oh, that's going to tighten down. So calls are escalating to ban prop bets, especially for bench and two-way players. So, for example, proposing a ban on bets like will player X, who is a bench player, or he's a two-way player, will player X score more than 6 points tonight? It's very easy for insiders to influence or predict these outcomes because bench and two-way players' playing time or stats are decided by last-minute coaching choices or small injuries. So insiders or those close to them can easily tip off whether they'll play at all or rack up points. Now, it's a very tight circle there, but it happens. It makes it easy to influence or predict compared to stars who always play. If this star is playing every day, that's one thing. If this other guy doesn't play every day, and the coach says, Dave, make sure you're ready tonight. Somebody hears that, whoa, Dave, make sure Dave's going to be playing tonight. Dave hasn't played in 12 games. He's playing tonight. So insiders can know or influence a bench player's minutes or role before the game via lineup decisions. You know, coach, yeah, I saw the lineup card he has. Dave's playing, but now Dave's not playing, So those are some of the easier ones they want to see maybe pushed out. But in essence, what it boils down to is that prop bets are highly vulnerable. Now, Congress is entering the fray. They're demanding briefings, warning the federal sports gambling standards. Gambling reform is no longer optional. They better do something. So who's really running the game now? The commissioner, the gamblers, or the politicians? And let's not forget the impact won't stop with reforms, even from older reforms. We're going to have shattered careers, and we're going to have rules that are going to affect this game drastically. So what's the fallout? Media in the open future? Well, right now there's immediate suspensions, there's public shaming, and there's calls for career bans with Billups, Rozier, others. Now, this mirrors the earlier Chauncey Porter case, which should have served as a warning, but they ignored it. They swept it under the rug. One-off. They knew it wasn't a one-off. That's how they treated it in terms of the NBA. So Chauncey Porter, the context for him, last year, March, April, he's a Toronto Raptors center. He was banned for life after admitting he manipulated his own performance in games. And he shared injury info with bettors. And he placed bets on NBA games, including against his own team. That's the cardinal sin right there. July 2024, he pled guilty to wire fraud conspiracy, facing 3 to 4 years of prison. He should have been the canary in the coal mine because his case exposed how easy it was for players to manipulate prop bets. However, the NBA and broader league either ignored it or didn't fully grasp the scope of organized crime involvement until the current 2025 scandal. I mean, let me know in the comments. But I think it's more likely the former. They knew and just ignored it, not the latter. And there's always been a long-standing suspicion of NBA integrity. Look, the league has faced for decades skepticism about fairness and transparency. Let's review some of these. The alleged lottery rigging dates all the way back to Patrick Ewing's 1985 draft. LeBron James' own comments by the 2003 lottery when the Cavs won the number 1 pick against long odds. The Lakers playoff series against Portland. Game 7 of the 2000 Western Conference Finals. Then Game 6 of the 2002 Western Conference Finals versus the Kings. Lakers faced Portland the first time, the Kings 2 years later. They're infamous. Many fans And even disgraced referee Tim Donaghy claimed officiating was manipulated to help the Lakers win. If Tim Donaghy, somebody who manipulated games, says that likely happened, I believe him. Then there's the front office, the NBA. They ignored the clear tampering when the Lakers were recruiting Shaquille O'Neal, when Orlando was trying to keep him there. Then again, mentioning Tim Donaghy, an NBA referee who served 15 months in federal prison after admitting he bet on games. He officiated and supplied insider info to gamblers. This was between 2006 and 2008. So his case remains the most famous example of direct NBA corruption, and it's fueled lasting doubts about the integrity of what league officiating and outcome. That's why I believe in my heart there were 2 Lakers series I saw with Portland. That turned me off the basketball. Stopped watching. And after Michael Jordan left the game, there was nothing to watch. And let's get more recent. The Luka Doncic trade was widely condemned. Dallas traded the superstar to LA for minimal in return. Secret trade. They could have gotten so much more had they opened it up. I personally believe Adam Silver knew, but sending Luka to LA, they want LA and New York to be the cornerstones of the league. New York has just sucked. LA through cycles has become the superstar team of the league. And I believe Adam Silver wants that now, and why Luka was there, with the caveat, don't worry, I think you're going to get lucky and get that overall number 1 pick and get Cooper flag. And they unexpectedly won against improbable odds, like 1.6%. Again, prompting rigging accusations. Then you have the gambling scandal being the latest blow. Look, the current scandal, stars arrested, betting plots exposed, that's seen by many as just confirmation that the NBA's problems with integrity have always been there and are far bigger than just a gambling. It's a culture of corruption. It's a culture of fixing, whether it's the games, through the refereeing, or through the draft lottery. My opinion. But my opinion is shared by millions of others. Then you also have to look at the reality of the game. They've had nothing but diminishing ratings. Since Michael Jordan retired, the NBA viewership has slumped about 50%. The league struggled to match Jordan-era excitement. That's just the bottom line. And declining ratings are a major concern. So the Jordan-era peak, 1998 NBA Finals, Michael Jordan's last, averaged 29 million viewers per game. Game 6 alone peaked at 36 million, the highest in NBA history. Current viewership last year was an exciting Game 7, higher than average. It only averaged 16.4 million for that game. And the series itself averaged under 11 million, less than half a Jordan-era peak. And this past season was one of the better finals. There's been worse off series. Now, regular season games today, they average around 1.5 to 1.9 million viewers. And that's compared to about 3 million per game at its height. So since Jordan's retirement, the league's TV audience has declined by nearly 50%, and the finals have not approached 1990s ratings highs. Enter the NBA's embracing of gambling. What does gambling do? It boosts revenue, it boosts attendance, and it boosts fan engagement. And the NBA aggressively pushed legalized gambling. Adam Silver was at the forefront. They lobbied for regulation changes and partnering directly with sportsbooks, which was unique among major leagues. It shouldn't have been. It was, to me, when I saw that, I was like, dude, they support gambling. They want gambling. They're okay with it. Look at their whole track record. They're okay with this. Gambling props and fantasy contests are now vital for keeping fans interested and driving the numbers. So many, such as I, see these latest scandals and the league's reliance on gambling for growth as symptoms of a deeper, long-standing integrity issue the NBA has had. Issues of corruption, favoritism, and bad business decisions that have shadowed basketball and the NBA for decades. Top players, coaches, and betting insiders, they're re-examining every access point and circle of trust, hoping to be able to clean this up. Because a lot of these guys out there, they just want to play the game. But the NBA, it's facing eroding trust, nervous sponsors, and a wait and see from regulatory authorities. Now, some critics may be wondering, is the league's betting boom its worst liability? Can reforms outpace evolving schemes? No. As betting grows, vulnerabilities will multiply. Gambling isn't just an engagement tool, but it's also a potential worst liability that invites abuse, corruption, and public scandals. And we're seeing that right now. We're just NBA. But what about college? Kids who aren't seen by anybody. You think the NBA, that's just the tip of the iceberg. All these sports across the board. And gambling addicts are everywhere. Yo, how's that lacrosse team looking today? Yeah, I got the prop bet that she's going to score in the first half. Really? I was just told she's not going to play. I mean, it's going to go down to every sport. Yo, Joe, you're getting ready to graduate here in a year. You're not going to go to pros. I'll give you, what, $2,000 a semester? How'd you like to earn $20,000? This is just going to get worse. The pace and complexity of reforms, AI monitoring, stricter rules in education, It's not going to be able to keep up with increasingly sophisticated schemes, leaks, and criminal innovation. Think about it like your antivirus on your computer. It's not proactive, it's reactive. They're constantly finding, discovering viruses, and then they build those into the antivirus, to block them, to clean your system. But there's really no proactive. Same thing here. They're going to be playing catch up to ways that criminals figure out how to game the system. And that's fueling mistrust among fans, media, and sponsors, and it should. And it's making it clear that the NBA's future credibility hinges on whether safeguards can truly stay ahead of bad actors. Is this the first chapter of a much larger story? Well, let's look at the heist movie element, where technology and law enforcement advances. So you have military-grade tech and rapid AI. They're turning cheating from a backroom sleight of hand to an arms race. But they also help expose and prosecute the biggest, boldest scams. What I'm trying to say here is this is just the first chapter of a larger story. Both sides are going to be using technology, one to catch, one to get ahead. The one to catch is always going to be playing from behind. But here's something we need to know or understand, that in the end, it wasn't the players. It wasn't somebody coming forward, somebody confessing, somebody giving the feds a tip, but it was the coders who cracked the case. Ongoing digital forensics was used to uncover additional high-profile names, and it expanded the investigation. And this is going to happen. It's going to expand it into other sports. That's what was used for this. But on the flip side, all this was used to expand the scamming, to expand the gambling, to make it easier to gamble. So the question is, can the NBA or any other league ever truly secure secrets in a world this hyper-connected? This is just chapter one of a much larger reckoning for fantasy, sports wagering, and inside access. Before I let you go, I want to talk about real quick what the media was saying about it. And I have to address this. I had to pull out my notes. I didn't have it in the main segment. I got a couple of minutes here. So Stephen A. Smith, the media section, I pulled that out. But he warned that the NBA gambling bust is bigger than it looks. He suggests it's part of a broader revenge plot connected to politics, specifically Donald Trump and casino history, and can spill into other leagues and scandals. Well, when he's right, it's going to spill. That's just any moron can figure that out. But Stephen Smith blaming Trump? It's like, come on. This investigation was going on a couple years. You know, it's a big story because it deals with sports figures. So it is a big feather in the cap of whoever's prosecuting it. And that's why Cash Patel went out and made that announcement. Has nothing to do with Trump. Look, Stephen A. Smith, as Denny Green yelled one day at a press conference, they are who we thought they are. Stephen A. Smith is just a duck with a C, spewing nonsense. He plays the bigotry and racism game when it's convenient. He pretends to chastise Democrats, and he does. But come November, come every election season, Democrat. You know, he's just trying. He thinks he's a serious player politically. He's not. But I'll give him his due. A big box, a big soapbox. So he's maximizing his clickbait. He's maximizing his subscriber base. He's maximizing his exposure. So he's smart to do that. But this rant on Donald Trump just shows how much of an buffoon he can be and is. He goes where the political wins. If he can get some clicks by saying this, he'll say it. If he can get some clicks by saying that, he'll say it. That's who and what he is. He's a fraud. And you know what irks me is, and I love Megyn Kelly, I love Patrick Bet-David. They're all like, get off your knees, people. He's not what you're trying to pretend he is. But anyway, he's talking about revenge. He emphasized the danger to league integrity. Duh. The NBA has always been corrupt. Then there's Charles Barkley versus Kenny Smith and Shaq. Kenny Smith argued the scandal is rooted in gambling addiction. Kenny Smith is partially right. Players with millions still make irrational, harmful decisions due to compulsion. No, it's not compulsion. They've never been told no. So they're going to do what they want to do. This isn't like, gotta do it. They're just doing it because they can. They love living on the edge. They know they're not supposed to. Nobody's ever told them no. Then they keep doing it, then the addiction comes in. But it's not the addiction that gets them to do it in the beginning. Now, Barkley called that explanation BS, saying this has nothing to do with addiction. These guys are just foolish. And Barkley's right, because that's how it starts. But eventually some do get addicted, I'm sure. It's pure stupidity. Now, King's going to say, well, you're enforcing my decision. It's illogical. There's no logic when you've never been told no. The kid, the quarterback, Deshaun Watson, all these happy endings he got by coercing, trying to play a game. Guy was making millions. He could have just gone out and picked up a girl and did it. It was illogical. Doesn't mean he's addicted. It's just stupid. Now, this is a very heated exchange. You know, then it was Pat McAfee. He had Adam Silver on before this went down. He appeared on the Pat McAfee show, Silver did. He called for more regulation on sports betting and specifically said he hoped for federal rules, not just state-by-state oversight. He admitted, quote, we've asked our sportsbook partners to pull back on some prop bets, especially those on two-way players. It's too easy to manipulate. Now, you look back at it, he knew what was coming down. Somebody gave him a heads up. And he was okay with all the prop bets, all of this until the investigation started happening. Then all of a sudden, we're asking our partners. He's trying to get ahead of the situation, but he's part of the problem, in my opinion. So the McAfee interview wasn't just a routine appearance. It was clearly made, in hindsight, we can see it was clearly made, Silver was strategically managing the NBA's message, addressing the integrity concerns, and prepping for a wave of scandals about fixing inside leaks and regulatory oversight that he knew were about to go public. All right. What will the next twist be? And who's really safe in the age of hyper-connected sports gambling? We'll find out, and we'll talk about it here on Points on the Board. So who's really controlling the game? The superstars, the fixers, or the fans who demand justice? More than $7 million vanished. Mafia ties were exposed. Congress is stepping in, and next-gen AI policing every play now. This is the NBA's crossroads. It started with rumors and locker room leaks. Then it exploded into arrests and high-level indictments. As the NBA bet everything on betting, scandals have turned it into a reckoning that's now shaking the league. It's insiders and every fan who ever placed a wager. Trust isn't just another game. It's the only one that matters. You lose it, and the NBA has nothing left. No fans, no sponsors, no legitimacy. That's Points on the Board for this week, my friends. Drop your thoughts in the comments, good, bad, or brutal. I want to hear them. And before you go, hit the like or thumbs up and share the podcast. Bookmark grumblingsmedia.com, browse the merch, and follow us everywhere. YouTube, Rumble, Apple, Spotify, y Pandora. Grumblings Media is the name. Before I go, this show has been every couple of weeks because we're going through a little bit of ownership changes here. So I'm figuring new things out. I am now completely in charge of the path, and I'm looking at new ways to do things, new days to do certain things. So I'm taking a step back, looking at the big pictures I did with my previous startup, and I'm starting to implement. So Points on the Board is still around, but there may be a week or so where I may skip it in lieu of other more pressing issues. But what we are looking for is potential podcast talent. Yeah, potential podcast talent, email us at support@grumblingsmedia.com. And with that, I'm William Del Pilar for Points on the Board, Grumbling Media's longest running show. Until next time, stay sharp, watch those bets, and remember, the house almost never loses. But even the NBA might if it loses our trust.
Hey everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these two boxes.